for people and that are building right in these spaces, online and locally as well. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. And we're blessed that people who have studied this tradition are doing this work, right? Because there are many out there who have not, right? And they are attempting to benefit people in these spaces, but oftentimes they do great harm. So Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, we're blessed that so many of our teachers have engaged with these spaces, oftentimes, against their own comfort, against their own wish, but they feel the necessity to be engaged. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Now we have Imam Bilal Khan, who is an Imam part-time, and at some point was full-time as well, in Carteret, New Jersey. And he is also doing his master's in anthropology. So this is, mashallah, something very beautiful that we see that those, mashallah, who have studied the tradition are also engaging in different fields so that they can bring a synthesis of thought between the Islamic tradition and fields of insight and study. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. So we're very blessed to have two wonderful guests tonight. And we'll have a discussion for now, and then after Isha prayer, inshallah, Imam Asad will be performing the Qasida Burda of Imam al-Busiri, rahimahullah. And so that will be a special treat, inshallah, for all of us. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. So I first wanted to start by asking our dear Imam what he sees, and he's been, how long have you been in the US? For 2.5 weeks? Okay, so he has a good sample size. What is some of the differences that you've seen between, the US community and your travels in the UK as well? We'd love to hear your insights there. So inshallah, let's start with that. And also, if we could learn anything about you, some fun facts, we would enjoy that as well. Alhamdulillah.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Salatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man ittaba'a al-huda. Amma ba'du, fa'a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Inna Allaha wa malaikatahu yusalluna ala an-nabi. يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم وصل عليه. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. To your question, what's the difference between the UK and the US? Well, in terms of the US, obviously, in terms of its size, sheer size, it's huge as opposed to the UK. So that's one thing. Actually, I was told that the US is big, but I didn't understand, because you see, with size, what happens is everything changes. So the access that you have to the community in the UK is very different to the access an imam will have to the wider community in the US. You could be doing amazing work in one particular area, but no one else knows you in another state. Whereas in the UK, you start to do some work in one particular city, and then you'll get known. And then what will happen is people will travel from city to city, from another city to your city, just to take benefit from you, with whatever benefit you can give. And that tawfiq comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. So that's one of the things that I noticed first and foremost. In my different imams, I follow Imam Safwan as well, mashallah, on his social media, and you're aware of particular people, but you don't know where they are, and you don't know what work they are doing, whereas in the UK it's very different. And therefore the challenges become very different as well, because if you want to do any sort of project or any sort of work, it's easier to extend your work to the wider public or to the people. Whereas in the US it's going to be difficult, because you're only restricted to one particular place. As for the challenges are very similar. The challenges are similar because it's generally the youth, the young people that are not really attached to the masajid anymore. The challenges are the same here in the US as well, as far as I'm aware, as far as I've been told. That you find the 13 or the 14-year-old involved in drugs, you find them, involved with all sorts of things which are not necessarily things which our religion teaches us. So that's the issue that we have everywhere around the world, and that's because what we're being fed now is generally the same, regardless of which country you're in, because of social media. And social media is a global village. In fact, we learned recently with the issue that took place in Palestine, as you're aware, that the whole sort of system crashed because of social media. It wasn't even because of mainstream media anymore. So social media has overtaken mainstream media, and because social media has overtaken that, everybody has an opinion. So because everybody can sit on social media now, whereas mainstream media, you'd have to get somewhere to actually go and have an opinion or voice your opinion on mainstream media. Whereas on social media, you could be anyone with zero knowledge, right? With zero experience of the world, and then you're voicing your opinion, and all of a sudden somebody likes what you say and it just blows up, right? So the challenges therefore are going to be very similar around the world now. The challenge is what you see in your country will be similar to what you see everywhere else, because that's what's being fed by everyone in similar regard. So that's what I feel the differences are and the similarities are between the UK and the US. The cars are bigger, the food is bigger here, the portions are bigger. They want to make you fat. That's what they want to do with. That's also something that it's a discussion that we should have, especially when it comes to diet and prophetic diet and controlling what you eat and controlling. That's very, very important. I went to Chicago. I met a family who only eats slaughtered halal food to the point where they have to go and do shahada of it, and then they eat. Otherwise, they don't eat any sort of chicken, even if it says halal. They don't trust it. That kind of thing is admirable. And I also met a brother in California who didn't even know about the concept of zabiha. Like, I asked him, I want to taste an American burger. And I just want a burger. It's chicken. Oh, it's meat. No, it has to be slaughtered properly. Oh, I'm so sorry, I don't know that. SubhanAllah. At least in the UK, I'm pretty sure that most people know. But in the US, again, these kind of things probably. So there are certain things which will be different, but that's food.
Imam Bilal, did you want to?
No.
You want to introduce yourself?
No, I'll introduce him.
Okay.
Inshallah. Imam Bilal is somebody who hosted me here, somebody who took care of me. Inshallah, he's a very competent young Imam who has grown up in this society, which is extremely important. To have Imams who have grown up in the society and then that can serve that particular society is probably one of the most important things for any society, wherever you are in the world. So Imam Bilal is somebody who's done that. Inshallah, he's learned his Islamic knowledge, and he's still learning, mashallah. And as Imam Safwan was saying, that he also goes to university as well. It's also important to understand and have the knowledge of the secular sciences as well. Mashallah, that's what Imam Bilal is doing. He's quite well known in his area. He's a very competent speaker. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase him in his ilm and his amal, and allow him to continue serving the religion. Tell me, I'm just going to ask you a question because I think it's the benefit of the people, right? So tell me about based on what I have said, what are the challenges that the people in the US face, young Muslims in the US face? Am I correct, or was I based on I've only got 2 or 3 weeks of experience, right? So you've been living here, so.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala ma ba'd. Imam, I think Jazakallah khair Imam Safwan for hosting us and organizing this beautiful event, and Jazakallah khair Imam Asad for those beautiful and very kind words. I think that feel like you've been around a lot of the older brothers and sisters and less around the younger brothers and sisters. I definitely do think that there's an issue on every level of the spectrum, right? So we have problems facing the youth, we have problems which the kids in college and universities are facing, and we have problems which the older crowd, the uncles and the aunties are facing as well. And I think a lot of our issues and our roots are stemming from, I guess, I don't want to throw it on exactly on one group. I feel like every group has their own issues, but I think a lot of our issues are stemming from one problem, and that's something relative to hypocrisy. I feel like when we sit in the first saf of the masjid and we're here for 5 times salat, and we tell our kids or we tell our peers and our friends and our family members to be good, to have sabr, to practice patience, to stay away from haram, but then we ourselves engage in that same haram that we're telling others to stay away from, it sets an example which is not possible for anyone to follow. You can't tell people stay away from haram and sit in the first row of the masjid for salat and pray your salat and then go home and commit that same haram. It just doesn't make any sense. So I think a lot of our issues here in America stem from this problem. So an idea of hypocrisy mixed with education, a lack of Islamic education, like you mentioned about the brother in Cali and the story of the burger. I feel like that's two of the biggest issues that we have. And when it comes to education, we are so adamant on sticking to what we know and not learning anything else that it creates problems like this. So if you tell someone that, there's such thing as zabiha halal, and you tell them that your meat should be slaughtered in a specific way, a lot of times their response will be like, what are you talking about? I learned this. This is the only way that I know. This is the only way this is what I'm going to eat. This is what I know, and I'm going to stick to what I know. And they won't change or try to learn something new. So, alhamdulillah, those are the things that I see. And I think you're pretty spot on.
There's no position when it comes to the across a lot of them. There are some scholars who said, they said that living in a non-Muslim country you can eat whatever, but it's not the orthodox position, it's not the position that we're supposed to be taking. But yeah, you're right, lack of knowledge. And I think we had this problem. I think in the UK, Islam is 30 or 40 years older than it is in the US. Meaning, I think Islam probably began, the first Muslims probably migrated in around 20s, 30s perhaps. And masajid started to establish in the UK around the 60s or the 70s, or probably prior to that, whereas I think in the US it's slightly later, which therefore means that you still have the capacity and the sort of potential not to make the same mistakes as the people in the UK made. One of the things was scholars coming over and bringing their issues over, as I was saying to some of the uncles here earlier, that the largest demographic of Muslims in the UK are the South Asian community, Pakistanis, the Indians, the Bangladeshis, right? So it's around 85%. Now, when it comes to practice and when it comes to all of these kind of things, they were set in their ways. And coming to a different country without understanding the context of that country and superimposing what your culture, had, or the culture that you learn, can be very problematic. And this is not something. This is khilaf al-sunnah. And Allah in the Quran says, "A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Ma arsalna min rasulin illa bi lisani qawmihi liyubayyina lahum." That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not send a messenger to any particular nation except that he understood the custom of the people, or the language of the people that he was living with. You still find the same problem in the UK. You go to an Imam and you say to him, maybe an elder Imam was there, who still assumes his position, still doesn't understand that maybe it's time for me to step down type of thing. And you say to him, so there's this girl on Facebook, and he's going to say, what book? Although everybody knows what Facebook is now. I'm just giving an example. Like what's Facebook telling you? What's Instagram? What's TikTok? Funnily enough, like the elders on TikTok these days as well now, like they're scrolling down and stuff. But you have to understand that the time, the culture, the custom of the people that you're living amongst. Alama Shami العابدين رحمه الله تعالى, he said, من لم يدري بعرف أهل زمانه فهو جاهل. That whosoever does not understand the custom of the people of his time, then he's not a scholar, he's anything but a scholar, he's actually an ignorant person. So our imams need to understand the community that they're living in. So kind of intermingle with them to see what's going on, like what are the current issues and things that are happening within our children. And that's why and there's a fine line though, not to get involved as well. Right? So recently something called Squid Game came out, I don't know if you heard about it, of course you have. These kind of things, like, I don't know, I've never watched it, but I did read about it. I had to read about it because I know that these are the things that young people are watching. So these kind of things are important for anyone to do. What would you say?
Oh, absolutely.
My apologies for the microphone setup, inshallah. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I would have to agree. We have to know the culture, and I would also add for the U.S. I did a janazah years ago, back in 2016, of a young man. He was 26 years old. He was a nurse, and he had committed suicide. And he was Muslim, and he was the last Muslim in his family. The last Muslim. So everyone at the janazah was not Muslim. And I had visited a family member the day before. I had visited the house of a family member of his the day before, and there was a plaque on the wall of a picture of like the great grandfather who came from Lebanon, and it said 1913. So they came from Faris Island. They came on the boats from the Middle East in 1913. And those Lebanese workers, they worked the shipyards on the East Coast. And so they worked the shipyards, and they were Muslim. They came in 1913. And so 1913, fast forward to 2016, and there's no more Muslims in the family. 100 years, right? A lot of Muslims, they don't realize that, they'll hear like a young Imam saying, like, yeah, we have to be culturally relevant, we have to be engaged, we have to be developing, we need to be strategizing for 50 years. They'll hear some of these things and, they take it maybe lightly. But those who are working in the field, who see the pain, who see the great loss and deterioration of what once was great Muslim families who built masajid, by the way. That same family were building masajid. Lebanese and Syrian workers in the shipyard were building masajid in the early 50s, right? And maybe they weren't too aware of Zabiha Halal because the Arabs were not as, adamant about it. And even today, they are more lax, and that's something they need to learn from their South Asian Muslim brothers and sisters, honestly. And the other thing is, the whole concept of ijtihad, right, is tajdeed, right? It is looking at the mas'ala and saying, maybe that was the fatwa 40 years ago, but how has it changed, right? Now, there's halal places all over. But 40 years ago, that was not the case. It was difficult, right? So when the conditions change, the fatwa changes. There has to be tajdeed, right? And so, I do believe that the scholars who gave some laxity in those times, they were needed, and also the people who pushed against it, right? They were the ones that allowed for us to have halal meat stores and halal food in cafeterias and universities, and so you needed both groups, right, in reality. And that's why, of course, we say that, the ikhtilaf of the ulama is rahmah, right? That their differences are mercy from Allah. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. So, it is very interesting, and some of the things that I've seen from the UK Muslim community is that they're a little bit ahead of us also in building real community, dense community. And if you look at any issue we have today, like for instance the marriage crisis, and you have kids taking to online dating apps and these types of things because there's no community, and the wali of the bride or the wakil, right, the one who's supposed to be investigating, they're not really able to make proper judgments because they don't even know the person, right? Part of the reason why marriages didn't require the amount of investigation that they do today was because people married, down the street from each other. You knew their family, you prayed with them, the fathers knew each other, right? So what people like to call like arranged marriages, not so much arranged, but they were built within community. So there was more ta'rif, there was more intimacy between families, and there was real community. So part of the struggle of, I would say, North American Islam is, yes, we do need to engage and use, right, media and social media. We have to do marketing, we have to do outreach, we have to do all of these things, but the end goal of those things, right, the objective of that outreach is to build local community. And that always has to, be understood, that this is a funnel. It can't just be accepting the status quo. It's a necessary engagement, right, to build an alternative model that's really been successful for us, and it's a part of our way, ta'aruf, right? So, alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Can I get a time check?
7:48.
7:48. MashaAllah. Okay.
Is there any questions we can take?
Yeah. So let's see. Now that we've kind of talked a bit, let's do some Q&A, inshallah. And just as a reminder, we are going to pray Isha at 8:15, and then inshallah ta'ala, Imam Asad will be performing a beautiful qasida for us after Isha, inshallah. So any questions from the audience?
Talking about the youth in UK, problem that we have here, you know better what kind of problems you have with the youth there. The one who are born there and growing up, going to school and maybe attending the mosque. So what do you get from them?
So what problems do we get from the youth in the UK? Like I said, it's very similar to what you have in the US now. A young guy who's born, that was born in the UK, will generally, if the family is well connected to the masjid, etc., then the family will often send the young child to the madrasa. We have after school madaris there in every city. In fact, it'll probably be almost impossible not to find they call it maktab or madrasa in the UK. You'll find somewhere where you can send your child. So every young child does, alhamdulillah, get some sort of preliminary education when it comes to the deen. I don't think that's the case here in the US, I'm not too sure. But there we have that. So therefore they still are connected to the deen, which gives us hope because the grassroots work is being done. Speaking about the competency of actually the teachers that are there, sometimes you find people who are just teaching and they don't know much except Quran, and they teach Quran only. So we have, at the moment, we are struggling with people, young children can probably read the Quran, but that's about it. When it comes to the further understanding of Quran, etc., there's no push on. So issues of aqa'id, issues of fiqh, all of these kind of things, no push on with that. So that's one issue. So then what happens is young children will learn the Quran, they'll know how to read the Quran, but they have no understanding. So when they go to universities or colleges or universities, because they can't back up what they've learned, they end up getting confused, very confused, and then the problem of atheism, which is a worldwide problem now, that starts to seep in, and they can lose their faith like that. So what we need to do in the UK is to build on that, okay? And perhaps from what can you take from it is that set up grassroots work for children, young children, where you can make sure that young children that are going through lower school, middle school, high school, they're learning the religion, not just Quran and how to read the Quran, but they're learning more. So they have the ability to understand or even back up any sort of argument or claim regarding. You get questions, and if a young child can't answer them questions, he begins to doubt their faith. So that's a problem. As well as the issues which are generally very popular amongst the West, which are like drugs, alcohol, the illicit relationships. These are just common problems which you'll find anyway, because that's the human nature. Human nature wants to either through curiosity, they call it in psychology, they call it the forbidden fruit complex. So the child will know it's wrong, but he just is curious to try it out, and all of a sudden he gets addicted. The child knows it's wrong, but he just wants to do it. So although he knows it's wrong, right, he'll still go into that kind of thing, and that. So these are general problems with that. They're the challenges that we're currently facing at the moment. So yeah. Question to me, shall I, or you guys want to answer? Okay. You shouldn't distinguish culture in Islam. I don't think that there's a distinct. In fact, culture works very well with Islam, but you need enough education to know what is the actual principle, the Islamic principle here, and what is actually culture. So I don't believe in this Islam versus culture thing. They're not two separate things. Just the way I don't believe in deen versus dunya. They're not two separate things. They are actually together. In fact, Islam, I generally explain it like, I think everybody's got Spider-Man. So, Bilal dispute with them, you can't compare, but just for you to understand. Venom is the symbiote, right? So, it latches onto whatever. Islam is like a religion, which latches onto any culture. Islam is a religion, it latches onto any culture, okay? And it should take over. But there are certain things which Islam considers based upon that culture. So how do you then strike a balance? Education. It's literally very simple. It's not too difficult. Meaning it's difficult to sort of go through, but the answer is very simple. You need to educate yourself. You need to know what are the principles. Okay, what is the principle? What is Islam teaching us here, and what is actually culture? For example, South Asians will know, I believe that there's many here. We have our wedding process and stuff, right? So what's actually the Sunnah? What is Islam teaching us the way the wedding should be? Not should be, but the way the wedding was in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. And then what is the cultural addition to that? Is there anything wrong with the cultural addition? No. Again, education. So the legal maxim is al-aslu fil ashya' al-ibaha hatta yadalla dalilu ala al-tahrim. Everything by default is permissible until you find there to be an evidence to say it's haram. So, is a mehendi permissible? Right? Yes, it's absolutely fine as long as there's nothing haram happening in that function. So there's no, complete free mixing, or there's no alcohol being served, etc., etc. Is a barat permissible? Yes, it's absolutely fine. That's a cultural thing. But there's nothing wrong with having these things so long as you're not contradicting core principles of the Sharia. So that's how you strike a balance through educating yourself, through knowing what is right and what is wrong. And it's not difficult because al-haram bayyin al-halal bayyin, kama qala alayhi salatu wasalam. Haram is clear and halal is clear. We know what's categorically wrong and we know what's right. Okay, and everything else is sort of a grey area. This is why you need to stay in touch with scholars. Proper scholars who understand the times that they're living in, and they can tell you, look, this is okay, this is not okay. But when you're doing something wrong, generally, naturally, you will probably feel that it's wrong because the fitra is inclined, your natural disposition is inclined towards what's right anyway. So that's probably the way that's my answer to the question. There's no, you shouldn't separate Islam and culture. In fact, Islam adopts culture, and culture should adopt Islam, and then you need to know what's right and what's wrong. Finally, like for example, a person can't say that I'm going to integrate to the point where I'm going to go to the pub and start drinking alcohol, right? Because that's categorically haram. But a person can integrate by wearing the clothes that they wear, or they would wear, like wearing a shirt and a tie, for example, shirt and tie and trousers or whatever, pants that's what you call it, right? You can do that because what does the Sharia say? The principle is you have to cover from your navel to your knee for a man. So you can do that in any way, so long as you're not contradicting the core principles of the Sharia, meaning you're not showing your navel to your knee for a man, for example. Okay? So you can wear whatever you want. Then there's an issue of tashbih, which is doing something or wearing something which will reflect another religion, which will make people assume that you are from that religion. Right? For example, we wear a turban as imams, right? Or as Muslims who wear a turban, because wearing a turban is a sunnah. But I won't tie my turban like a Sikh, because that is tashbih now. So people may assume I'm a Sikh. That would be wrong, right? So to know what's right and what's wrong, and then to work with that, that's the best way to sort of bring Islam and culture together. Is there anybody else want to add?
MashaAllah, Jazakallah khair. Thank you for that beautiful answer, and thank you so much for the question. I think we have to realize that we're really navigating two spaces. One is an immigrant aspiration to preserve culture and language. And then on the other side, there is an aspiration for da'wah, as in how do we actually call these people to the oneness of Allah. And so these two aspirations are constantly clashing, right? So for instance, when we come to the masjid, a masjid is really a place not only for worship, but it is a place of cultural preservation for many communities. It's the place where I get to put on my kurta or my shalwar kameez or my thawb and have some sort of acknowledgement of home, of nostalgia, and then the food. It's a place where we can have that food. We can have those, dishes that our mom used to make, and we can talk with people who speak our language, right? So the masjid is a project of cultural preservation for many people, right? On the other end of that, right, you have converts, you have people who are born here, right? And so the masjid is a place for them really for solely religion, right? Because they have no other place to practice that, and they're not really able to engage, right, with many of the cultures of people who are here, right? So it's often this, really a clash of separate objectives. And we have to recognize that. So someone could be saying, we need to preserve our culture, preserve our language, right? And in the same breath, someone is saying, we have to call people to Islam. When you look at the Quran, right? The Quran is not trying to make Islam something exotic or foreign. It constantly alludes to Ahlul Kitab, Christians and Jews. It constantly alludes to the prophets that other religions relate to and know and love, right? So Islam, as presented by the Quran, is trying to present itself as this continuation. At the same time, it's also presenting itself as a deen of fitrah, right? A deen of purity, a deen of oneness, right? And as he mentioned, right, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِن رَسُولٍ إِلَّا بِلِسَانِ قَوْمِهِ. So from that aspect, you know, I remember I had one gentleman, an African American gentleman who had just come out of prison, and he became Muslim in prison, right? And in prison, Muslims really they enjoy a certain type of refuge. They're excluded from a lot of the hatred and fights between the different gangs, right? They have a place of worship, they have brotherhood, they have rituals and practices, and that's why, you know, prison is a place where Islam is growing at a rapid rate, right? And so there's a type of izzah, there's a type of pride. Right? These gentlemen who converted to Islam in prison and then they come out into the world, they feel a lot of pride in their religion. They come out and sometimes, you know, they're wearing the thobes, they're wearing, you know, they're all decked out. I remember one gentleman who was, mashallah, a close friend of mine, and over the years we got to know each other. But he used to wear like a nice crisp white thobe and the kufi and everything. And he would walk down the street of inner cities, you know, of the hood, right? And, you know, he used to love that feeling that he was kind of like this exotic thing, this foreign thing, this strange thing, right? وَتُوبَى لِلْغُرَبَاء, right? And blessed are the strangers. And so he didn't realize, though, and what many people don't realize is that, yes, the shock factor is a form of da'wah. As in, you've shocked someone, you're something new, you're something strange, and they might ask you like, oh, are you Muslim? What's, you know, and they might be fascinated by that. But it's a double-edged sword, because at the same time they might think, there's no way I could ever be that, because I would have to change everything about me, right? I would have to change the way I dress. I would have to change. When in reality, the only thing they have to do is say La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. They have to embrace oneness, and then, you know, they can go on a journey beyond that, right? And so that's why, you know, questions like these are difficult to answer, because, you know, what we do, you know, really is based on our objectives. We say, right? Based on objectives. So as communities, we need to create some type of communal consensus through dialogue, through discussion, on how we can retain culture, right? Because we don't want to, you know, we don't want to destroy our cultures from back home, right? But at the same time, we have to make sure that when a convert walks through the door of the masjid, that they have a place where they can talk, where they can experience Islam from a place that's not foreign, from a place that feels like home, right? They need to feel at home here just as much as everyone else. And over time, I've you know, developed some thoughts on this, that, you know, even if we say we have an event where, you know, 9 out of the 10 tables are for, say, speaking Urdu or speaking Arabic, right? That at least there's one table, right, where people have institutionally been designated, right? You're the welcome team. You're, you know, to host people who are, you know, indigenous to these lands, to make sure that they're speaking in terms that they know. And the youth are the same way. Many of them are, you know, more American than they are anything else in terms of culture. So we have to recognize that as well. It's an excellent question. Imam Bilal or Imam Asad, you'd like to add? Yeah, sure.
While you're telling the story about your friend from prison, thought came to my mind. There's a specific group of people studying anthropology. This is something that we study culture a lot. So there's a group of people who, when someone passes away and they have a funeral, instead of burying them, what they'll do is they'll have a party for them. Instead of burying them straight away, they'll have a party for them. They'll dance around the grave. They'll dance, not the grave, the casket. And even after the person is buried, part of their culture is to basically party because this person has left the world. So things like that are naturally against the fitrah. It's natural, naturally speaking, even if you look into science, a few hours after someone passes away, their body begins to deteriorate. They lose the light in their eyes, they lose the color in their fingernails, and their body starts to decay. So naturally, and this is why within Islam, one day one of the Sahaba, they come to one Sahabi, they come to in front of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he begins asking him, what deeds have you done this morning? And among one of the deeds that's mentioned is that he prayed someone's janazah, and he mentioned that it was dark, and I was passing by, and I saw someone's janazah, and I stood in his janazah, and we prayed this person's janazah. Now just think about that for a moment, right? They prayed the janazah, and not only was the Prophet ﷺ not there, they prayed without him, and but it was in the middle of the night while he was on his way to Fajr, right? So now think about these people. So Islam teaches us that when someone passes away, you quickly bury a person, you quickly get the janazah over with, and you pray their prayer, and you let them rest. You put them into the ground. Now think about these people. Part of their culture is to party in front of the body of their dead beloved one. Not only that, they delay the burial process, so that's automatically against things which are natural. So when Islam teaches us, and Islam speaks about culture, and just like how Imam Asad mentioned, how everything pretty much in culture is allowed until it contradicts Islam. And that contradiction, the reason why I brought up the story, is for a particular reason. It's not for no reason. Because think about it, like imagine all the smells that are coming from the body when people are dancing around. Or imagine like how unrestly the deceased is feeling. So Islam places these things in order or in check for our benefit. Not just because it's a rule, it's a book of rules, right? And while also piggybacking off of this story, I think it's really important, just like Imam Safwan mentioned, how there should be like that designated team which discusses with the people who are English speakers, right? I think a lot of our problem is that when we see culture, a particular thing being done in a certain way, for example, when a Pakistani says, "I'm going to read namaz," right? We say this right now. I'm going to read namaz. Someone is very quick to speak up and say, "What is namaz?" It's salah. Let them be. Let them say namaz. What's wrong with saying it, right? That's their cultural way of understand. That's how they culturally understand Islam. That's their cultural language, and they're using that. And similarly, in other ways, when people mention certain rituals in the masjid, or they speak about different things in relative to Islam, like a lot of Pakistanis, they also say, I'm using Pakistan as an example because I'm an Urdu speaker, but I remember seeing at an ICNA convention a few years ago a shirt which had the number 5 on it, and inside that 5 were over 100 different words of different ways to say salah, of different cultures. So every culture has their own way of saying different things, and I think as community leaders and as people who are trying to build community, it's important for us to let people say things the way they're saying it, so long as it's not disrespectful and there's nothing, then there should be no problem and no issue with it. And you should let people do things. That's just because these things at the end of the day, what people are wearing or how they're saying, they're calling, or they're speaking about certain rituals, it's just the surface level of things. What's more is important is how we use this culture now to invite people to Islam.
Something that I felt, especially as you guys were answering questions about like relative problems in the UK versus the US. I'm about to turn 21 now. I've been hearing in massages and stuff since I was like 11, 12. I have felt this kind of constant, I'll be totally blunt here, there's this constant sense of a lot of doom and gloom with like associated with young young Muslims.
Mm.
Like since I was like 12, it's always, oh, you guys have so many problems. Whenever the Imam comes, it's like, oh man, the youth, like they really have it going on. And a lot of times in between youth, it's almost like becomes, there's like sometimes it's such an internalized lack of hope.
Yeah.
When it comes to that, like it's almost like accepted that, hey, like it is what it is, like, you know, we have all these problems with this anyway. And I think for me, coming into the college that I came to, I met a lot of teachers and a lot of friends who had a very different perspective on Islam that for me seemed a lot more hope and love oriented. And I know the title of today's was, you know, finding joy in the beloved. And so that was very refreshing for me is to hear all of these, you know, these same things coming from the perspective of, you know, love and joy and stuff like that. So I guess my question to you all is, you know, when you are dealing with a lot of situations as community organizers and issues that I can understand from your perspective might also feel somewhat, you know, doom and gloom, might seem kind of hopeless. You run into these kind of situations. How do you maintain that, you know, the positive aspiration and that joy of the beloved throughout all of these things in a way that doesn't make people lose hope, not only in themselves but also in the mercy of Allah? Your open question, I just would love to hear that.
It's a beautiful concept. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. You know, this religion is one that is based on mahabba. You know, it is a religion that's based primarily on love. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam says in a beautiful hadith, al-mar'u ma'a man ahab, right? That the person is with the one whom they love, right? So this idea that, you know, in the next life, right, part of what determines your place in eternity is where you place your love, right? And you know, there's a few things I wanted to address very quickly, right? You know, one of them is this idea of suspicion and optimism, right? Just as the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentions, right, that man qala halaka an-nas, right, fahuwa ahlakum, right? It's like whoever says, right, that the people, right, are doomed or are destroyed or ruined, right? For he is the one, well, there's two ways to read this hadith actually. One is that he is the worst of them, right? And then the other way to read it is that he is the one who destroyed them, right? And so if we know from Surah Yusuf, right, that Yusuf alayhi salam, that Yaqub alayhi salam, right, he doesn't tell his sons, I think you're going to kill Yusuf, right? He says, إِنِّي أَخَافُ أَن يَأْكُلَهُ الذِّئْبُ. He said, I'm scared that the fox will eat him, right? So he was wary to tell his sons, you know, that I suspect of you something negative, right? So he made up another excuse because he understood that people act according to that what you suspect of them, right? So if you voice your suspicion, you are essentially creating a pathway for them to accept the call of shaitan, to be that at that level, right? And so optimism, right, and always being positive and embracing people positively is a rukun of this deen. It's a pillar of this deen, right? But I would say that also, you know, in regards to joy, joy is, you know, something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wishes for us, and part of that wish can be seen in the fact that He made such few things obligatory, right? So you have, for instance, salah, which is obligatory 5 times a day, right? There are, you know, other things that He makes obligatory or forbidden for us. But if you look at ibadah, most of ibadah is voluntary. And so one can pursue joy in their worship, right? And ultimately we want people to develop joy in their salah, right? Of course, we want people to enjoy that which is obligatory. But furthermore, if someone has a particular joy in sending salawat upon the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and doing that abundantly, then that is what should be his focus, right? And if someone enjoys, right, reading the Quran and memorizing the Quran and prioritizes that, that is also good for them. And if someone likes to fast day and night, that is good for them, right? Someone is very good at tahajjud, that is what they should focus on, right? So this idea of variety, right, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the same way that He gave us the ability to taste different foods, savory and sweet and spicy, is the same way that we're also supposed to find joy, right, in worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I think that's a very important thing, and I don't know, can I get another time check?
8:17.
Huh? 8:17, I'm so sorry. So inshallah ta'ala, for those who have joined us now, we will pray Isha, and then inshallah ta'ala we have a very beautiful performance of Qasida Burda by Imam Asad, inshallah ta'ala, after Isha. So stick around, inshallah ta'ala. And inshallah we'll also have Sheikh Ismail. We want to make sure he meets Imam Asad and Imam Bilal, inshallah ta'ala. Maybe we'll get a picture all together, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan, barakallah feekum. Oh, we have to make adhan. He's going to say, well, salah. Barakallah feekum wa